Well, I can compare it to my last business, which I spent about 17 years in the industry. I mean, if I had to graph it out, it was kind of a slow, steady, incline. I mean, with real estate, I'd say within the first year, I just saw just a huge jump, not only in cash flow, but net worth, experience.
Hey, Chad, welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Michael. Glad to be on here. This is awesome.
It was
A man
great
himself.
seeing you at Dealmaker Live back in the summer, and you were on stage to receive the Freedom Hall of Fame coin, which is normally rewarded to people who are financially free with real estate. And you had a six-figure income last year in real estate, is what you told me earlier. So what does that feel like to be able to cover your living expenses from basically what started with a side business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome just to, find something you're passionate about with real estate and just to be able to develop that from a hobby into a business. And it's just the compounding and the snowball effect that it has is amazing. Over time, it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's been really rewarding.
And yeah, now you've had other businesses before, and just from
Yeah.
your own experience as well as what you've seen around it, and it takes a long time to build a significant business.
Yeah, it
And
does. I mean,
and
yeah, a
how
long
would
time.
you compare the pace with which you can build a syndication business to some of the other business you've seen?
Well, I can compare it to my last business, which I spent about 17 years in the industry. I mean, if I had to graph it out, it was kind of a slow, steady, incline. I mean, with real estate, I'd say within the first year, I just saw just a huge jump, not only in cash flow, but net worth, experience, and education.
Yeah, and a lot of things people don't realize is the acquisition fees are very meaningful, especially early on. And my experience has been that and I've done a bunch of shenanigans and startups and businesses myself, and I have just never seen a business that you can ramp as quickly as apartment buildings. It's just staggering to me.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, the upfront fee you can make on the deal, and then besides that, just the cash flow from the equity you earn as a general partnership. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, six figures out of the gate.
Now, what point did you get started in real estate? What was going on in your career where you started looking at real estate?
Yeah, I still was doing full time the last business with the credit card processing services. Did well at that, and then it was always a hobby of mine or a passion of mine to be in real estate. My family was, some friends of mine were as well, and started listening to podcasts. Yours being one of those, a lot of books. Just talking to people that were friends of mine, and after about 3 years of researching, finally bought my first property, bought a fourplex, and my wife said, "Well, you can only do this if you don't self-manage." I'm like, all right, I'll hire a PM company to manage it for me. So got the fourplex and just got the bug, got a 15 unit, got a 20 unit. And then I was like, all right, brakes on. My underwriting model is crap. I can't figure out how to make these mistakes anymore or to learn these lessons. So I found your mentoring program, and so we'll get that later on here, but that was what turned the corner for me. And that was kind of my first journey in the real estate.
What was your plan? I mean, it's a lot of people just get started because, like you said, you got the bug. Like I sold one of our first house we bought. Instead of selling it, we just rented it out. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool, right? Someone's paying down your mortgage. But it's typically when you're doing a house, that's like hundreds of dollars, right? It's not very meaningful. And so most
Yeah.
people have this experience and are like, oh, that's pretty cool. I can get some supplementary income. But no one really thinks, oh my gosh, I can actually use it to cover my living expenses, like within the next couple of years. That's amazing to me. Like, what was your plan when you got that duplex? Did you just want to dabble? What was your thinking at the time?
Man, it was 100% dabbling. It totally was. Like, I think I was sort of follow the Brandon Turner method of buy one home per year for 10 years and be
Yeah.
financially free. And honestly, I had no plan. I just didn't want to buy a piece of real estate. I knew it was a great idea. I knew it was a great investment. I knew it would be good long term. The deal wasn't cash flowing at all for a year. So I was actually upside down for a whole year on that deal. But I knew I was in real estate as a win, right? I got my first deal, check, got that box checked. But then I was like, okay, wait a second, I can do more with this. But then I started reading about, buy bigger properties, like 15, 30 unit properties, you can get more scale. And that's eventually when I found this other model called syndication. And then it's what really sped that growth up. But back to what you said, I was totally dabbling at first. There's no plan. If you asked me 3 years ago, if I'd be looking at $15 million assets today, I would say you're crazy. There's no way you're doing this. There's no way. But a lot can change.
Well, this is the problem when you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? You're like, oh, passive income, so exciting. And you're like, well, how should I do it? I'm going to flip a house, should I wholesale? That's what I did. I just started flipping houses, and I was like, ooh, I did it. I'm in real estate. I did it.
You have a job though. It's a job.
Yeah, right. And I did what exactly? Like, what did I accomplish exactly? And most people are like that. They're like, as long as I'm in the real estate game, somehow that must be good, right? But we don't really think about, well, how do we actually going to achieve our goals? And sometimes we don't even have goals. A lot of times it just starts off, oh, I'm just going to have some side income, right? It's good to have side income. And at what point did it start shifting to you when you kind of went, interesting, I can make six figures from this business with a little extra effort? Like, when did you realize that?
Let's see, the fourplex, I didn't make a lot off that right away. The 15 unit was the big value add, not a lot there either. I mean, the 20 unit was value add. So honestly, I didn't make any true cash flow for probably a year in real estate. And this is before I started in syndications. Now, syndication, different story. First one of those, we got paid about 90 grand up front on our syndication fee. And that's when we started getting, true income from the property from that deal. So it takes a little bit of time, but I say when you flip to a model where there's that upfront, the fee up front, that's going to be a lot more income for you out of the gate.
And I think a lot of people maybe not know that the acquisition fees are actually a meaningful source of income. And actually probably the most meaningful, because when you're doing a value add deal, like you said, there's not a lot of cash flow in the beginning. But 3% of an acquisition fee is significant. For every $1 million you buy, just $30,000, right? So, the average deal that our students do working with a mentor is about $4 million. So what is that? It's $120,000. Typically, there's going to be two partners. So split two ways, $60,000 a person. That's significant. You do two of those a year, and that's a six-figure income off that and like you said, now what happens, though, is that your net worth starts building significantly because the equity you're building up. And then in years 2+, you're starting to get a lot more equity. And so it's really those acquisition fees that make a difference. Now, you said earlier that you were a little stuck. At what point were you stuck, and why did you feel like you were stuck?
I was stuck because I felt like I had enough knowledge to take down a 20-unit property, but not enough knowledge to take down a 50-unit property. And my mentality was, I'll make my own mistakes first on my own money before I use investors' money, which may have hurt me in the very beginning, and it is what it is. But, I was a little more risk averse. And I knew that if I wanted to take on bigger properties, which I wanted to, I had to get a mentor involved. And my underwriting model had glaring errors, like formula errors, and it was bad. I'm like, this is never to happen ever again. I can't ever underwrite with this model. So I found your model actually through a friend of mine, and then kind of went down a rabbit hole to the mentoring program. So, but that when I was making mistakes with my model, and when I knew I had to learn more with other people and get a mentor involved, that's where I knew I had to change some things.
So let's talk about, you didn't want to raise money earlier on. You wanted to use your own money. And that's a very common thing, especially if you have your own money. You're like, well, let me lose my own money first, And I always say, well, you shouldn't lose anyone's money. You're like, you should educate yourself. You should have a strong team. You should not lose any money at all. And that's really my counter argument to that. Oh, let me lose my own money first. What were some, so maybe that was something that maybe held you back a little bit. You're like, oh, I'm just going to use my own money. Obviously, you're not buying a 100-unit property if you're just using your own money for what. So that was one thing that you were maybe struggling with. What else maybe were you struggling with before you joined the mentoring?
Yeah, I mean, raising capital was one of those. I was struggling with really how to underwrite the right way. I mean, that was one of because I'm a very analytical kind of a guy, very numbers oriented, very detail oriented, over analytical at times. And I feel like learning the underwriting model was so important to know grasp the whole numbers and how the whole deal works. But even more than that was learning how the whole syndication process works, like how you put a deal together, how you do the due diligence, very important, how you asset manage a property, how you find partners and team members. So I think learning the whole entire structure was very valuable. But the underwriting is so important. I think of all the skills you have to know, I think you must know underwriting. Whether you're going to do it or not, you got to know how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about mentoring for a second. It's been my experience when every time I have not had a mentor and advisor, things have gone badly for me because I felt like I'm a smart guy. I can figure stuff out, and I normally can, but I make massive mistakes in the process. Things take a lot longer. Conversely, when I have a mentor who has already done what I want to do, in the mentor's mind, what I want to do is fairly simple, very straightforward. I've done it. You can do it, and I'm like, I'm not sure I can. What difference has working with a mentor like made for you? Obviously, one is underwriting skills. There's no question. I'm reading that, and that's a skill you can learn very, very quickly. But what are some of the other differences that working with a full-time syndicator has made for you?
I think it's giving the confidence. Like you said, they've already been there. So them it's like a no-brainer, right? Like, oh, you got this. No problem at all. I'm here for you, buddy. Like it's there's no problem at all for them. Whereas for us, for me, is like brand new thing. Like going from 4 units to 20 was a big jump, right? Go from 20 to 70 was like huge. But to them, it's like, oh, they're doing 150 plus all day long. No big deal. So just getting that comfortability factor with the mentors and knowing that you can run all these things past them and have them fact check your underwriting models and give you advice. They've already been there, several times years ago. Just having that confidence was, I think it's hugely important. For a new person, you don't have that confidence yet. So I always tell people, like, having a mentor gives you confidence, shortens the learning curve, limits the mistakes. It's a win. Yeah.
Oh, you say confidence, and the same thing is you got to believe you can do something, right? If you can't believe you can do something, why would you ever take a step in that direction, right? You got to have at least an ounce of belief that it can be done. You might not have all the details, but you got to believe, right? And a lot of people are held up by that because they can't believe it can be done. And I think to me, mentors and advisors give me that ingredient that allows me to move forward. I don't have all the answers, but this person somehow is confident in my ability to do something, even though I'm not. Why is that? It happened over and over in my life, and it sounds like it made a big difference for you as well. You're like, maybe I can bite off this larger property. Maybe I can raise some money. And how did you overcome the ability to raise money? A lot of people are stuck in, I can't raise money. I've never done raised money before, and I certainly don't want to ask my friends and family for the reason you mentioned before. God forbid I'll lose their money. How did you overcome the fear of raising money or the potential of losing someone else's money?
Well, I think to answer your question, I have to kind of start a little before that. So, I knew I was really numbers oriented and detail driven. So when I did my first syndication, I chose to work with two partners that I'd known for a long time. And we all three banded up like, oh, we're going to buy this property. It's about 70 units out in, Indiana here. And we're going to divvy up our responsibilities. So I'll do the underwriting. I'll find the deal, underwrite it, and then you go do capital raise, and then your team members are going to help with asset management. So yeah, we got three-legged stool here. So we go out there, we go to closing, and we're about 2 weeks before closing, and we realize our $1.4 million raise, we have about $1 million raised so far, and we get to closing, and we're still at $1 million. And I realized right then that I needed to learn capital raise and do it. And I had to make a bridge loan on the property personally to get us through closing, right? And it was multiple six figures, and I wasn't very happy with that, but I learned a lesson there and got it done, got paid back, of course. And when I finished that close and that deal, this is back in December of this past year, I immediately went and got some resources to learn how to capital raise, and I immediately put it into action. And I decided I was going to form my own company, Focus Capital, and I'm going to go out and learn capital raise. I'm going to get a deal. It's a small one. I'm going to prove I can do it. So I went and found a $1.2 million asset to raise $400,000. I did it in 7 phone calls. I said, all right, I can do this. Let's go. So I think for me for years, I kind of flew under the radar. I didn't really want people to know what I was doing, just being kind of passive about it, just do my own thing. I'm just kind of how I am by nature. I realized you've got to let people know what you're doing, or they're not gonna know how to invest with you. You have to get the word out there, right? So that's kind of how I got into my capital raise journey. But once I realized I could do it, now it's like, wow, people actually love to invest in real estate. They love to have the opportunity.
Now, do you have partners moving forward, or what is your view on partners right now?
Yeah, I think partners are great as long as you have complementary skill sets. I think if you've got partners that you kind of are all, visionaries, kind of like the EOS model, then maybe you kind of have too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing. I think that you're not going to get a lot done efficiently. So I do still have partners on other deals. Our path moving forward is building out a local team here, which we're growing. And then I also will have some partners on some deals going forward strictly for capital raise.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think you mentioned a few things that are critical. One is defining your roles and responsibilities very carefully. I mean, the way you had it in your previous partnership actually works pretty well. I'm going to do the deals, you're going to raise the capital. And so now
Yep.
you know who's accountable. And so that's very important, number one. But number two, that doesn't mean that you as a deal finder shouldn't raise money, right? And it also, your capital raiser should know how to underwrite deals. It's just
Yep.
that the accountability is different. But I think it's a good point. To be a well-rounded operator, you really need to know all those things. But your accountabilities have to be very precise. Otherwise, it's unclear who's actually accountable for raising the money. And I think that's where I've seen partnerships kind of fall apart when those roles are not cleanly defined.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, we had a full, document of roles and responsibilities all lined out. So I mean, that was the plan. We had a great plan going forward. It just didn't end up that way. But all in all, I think it was a great learning experience. We're all still friends today. We're still on calls every month. It's still going well. But I learned that for me personally, I've got to have capital raise be the most important thing that I do. Is that for me, I've identified that as being your highest revenue per hour task. Honestly, it is. I think it is. Well, that and finding deals.
Yeah, those two, finding deals and raising capital, right? If you have access to capital, your biggest problem is finding deals. So that
Chicken
becomes
egg.
your biggest problem, chicken and egg, right? If you're a deal finder, your biggest problem is capital, which is why joint ventures work so well in this business. And I don't know if you were ever used to joint venturing before. I wasn't, right? And in the restaurants or certainly my job and also house flipping. I mean, the idea of partnering with someone was completely foreign. It was just me, right? And maybe a bunch of contractors, but the idea of actually joint venturing with someone was completely foreign to me. And that once we got into the syndication world and figured that out, that was a game changer. And I don't know if that was for you as well, just the idea of actually joint venturing with people.
My third deal, I did a joint venture. I'm sorry, my second deal, my 15-unit deal. A buddy of mine, I know him for years. He actually was in commercial real estate and apartments himself. Was making a change in his life, and he wanted to kind of mentor me in a way to find my first larger deal. So he found me an off-market property, 15 units. We did a joint venture on that deal. I was 80, he was 20. I put up my portion of the capital, him his. So that was the first joint venture, which that's what really got me into real estate, honestly. A 4-unit I wouldn't really consider multifamily really, but yeah, I think they're definitely beneficial. I agree.
So what are your biggest challenges now?
Now my challenge is, how do I be a great leader and build a team? Because I know that people is how you scale. And it's implementing EOS, our system, our processes, really figuring out asset management, getting a program for that. Today, our challenges would be finding enough deals that will pencil. We do have one right now that has a nice assumable loan at 3.6%. We're trying to take down. We're currently investing in final. That'd be our biggest deal to date. But I think right now my focus is building a team and being a qualified buyer to these sellers, that want to sell a big deal.
Yeah, so deal flow is obviously a big problem. I mean, if you land that, then your biggest problem will be raising money. It's like this giant ebb and flow. Now, as you're building your team, especially early on, do you partner? Do you bring on partners? Do you bring on employees? Do you bring on 1099s? Where are you right now when you're thinking?
So far, I've got a virtual assistant, which she's 1099. I've got a analyst who is paid in equity right now. I bring on a director of operations next week, or this week actually, 2 days, and she will be an employee. She'll be salary plus equity/bonus. Looking at 2 more hires in the next 6 months, probably acquisitions and then also investor relations. I see what's coming ahead in the next 12 months. We're going to be well prepared for that, but we're going to be mostly employees. I think for me as an owner, it's better to have the employee type role. I can see pros and cons, both to employee to partners, but I think to have, build a great culture in a company, to build just a great alignment with everyone's interests and not have someone distracted to other businesses. I think for me, having employees is better.
Clearly, the problem is early on, how do you pay for it, right? Because your revenue isn't that high. Now, you have the acquisition fees to play with. You might have savings from previous business that you can play with as well. How do you pay for all that? And that's the thing. Normally, you cover the overhead with asset management fees that requires a certain amount of scale, right? Yep. So So how are you going to cover the overhead?
Yeah, so great point. So I'm personally making an investment in the business, to bring in the operations person. I- it's a bit of a risk, right? I mean, I see what's
It
coming
is.
ahead in the next 6 months. I know the next deal we're going to do right now, we'll close on next month. We'll pay for her whole annual salary, but she'll be getting a blend of a base salary plus bonus and equity. But that base salary still is overhead, right?
Yeah.
So I have a fractional CFO I work with, and we're modeling out our cash flow picture and our comp plan structures the next, couple of years. But part of it, Michael, part of it is an investment into the business for myself. If I didn't have that luxury from other business I have, like I would probably have to do partnerships, honestly. I probably would, because it wouldn't be cash flow today to cover their salaries. But I feel like since I had that luxury, I can do that to invest in them right now.
And it is a bit of a luxury, just to be clear about that. You have money to invest in the company, but I think it's the best way. And the other way is to bring on partners, right? To do what I'm going to bring in a chief underwriter, like you said, you're going to pay them an equity. They work for free, but they get paid equity, and that's how we got started as well. We just brought in partners, and that worked very well for a number of years until the income of the business allowed us to basically not have to do that anymore. I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, the less partners you have, the better. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
you got to slice the pie.
You paying your analyst on equity at 5% on a big
Oh,
deal is like six figures,
oh
right?
yeah,
But I
yeah.
mean, let's call a spade, right? You go hire an analyst, and locally here as an employee, you'll pay half of that for an entire year for the salary. So you just got it's a business, right?
It
I
is a
think starting
business.
out, I can see why partners would be a better way to go.
Well, maybe. I think in the beginning, if you're trying to get off the ground, it's really for many people, it's really the only option you have. The only thing you have to play with is equity, right? Future equity in deals, and that's your currency, right? You can't pay someone a salary or anything like that, but then you got to deal with a situation like you said. We had partners in the early days. By the time the dust settled and the deal was sold 5 years later, they got a staggering amount of equity, far exceeding anything they could have done. We're like, that's a painful
Yeah.
check to write, and so this
But
is,
you got
but that's right. But without that person and without partnering with that person, we couldn't have done the business. So it's like, like you said, chicken and egg problem a little bit. But this is kind of, now you've scaled a business before, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I did.
How is
We
this?
did.
Yeah. So how is this different or similar to what you did before?
The other business was more of a sales business, so I didn't have to really manage a big team. I was an independent contractor for another company, and just it was kind of me and one other person, my admin. So there wasn't really scaling involved. But with that business, I felt like I was always a hamster at a hamster wheel. Like always finding the next deal, the next sale, constant turnover with customers, constant, weekend phone calls. And honestly, for me, like it was a great business to be in, but I just want to have something that I had more control over. Than something that like is a hard asset to look at that's not going to go away. People have a place to live, and it's only going to keep getting over time and appreciate. So, as far as how the businesses differ, this has been honestly just a huge learning curve for me. It's been a lot of fun. I'm very passionate about it, but it's been a lot of work, a lot of work. In terms of like building the team, right? That's hard. It's been a lot of work. But as far as actually finding the deal and doing my first syndication, that was way easier in terms of my other sales job.
Well, it's funny. Most syndicators do their first deal, and it's a huge milestone, obviously, something to celebrate. And then, most syndicators starting out, their scaling plan is simply to do another deal, and that's it. And I think you recognize that there's more to it. You're actually investing in the future of that. Well, if I keep doing these deals, the wheels are going to come off. So therefore, I'm going to need an assistant. I'm going to need an underwriter. I'm going to need someone to run the operations. But most people don't recognize that. I think the only reason you recognize that is probably because you had some exposure to running a small business before. But it is all about building the team. I think, talking about financial freedom for a second, there's like different tiers of financial freedom. One certainly is getting out of the hamster wheel. It sounds like you're out of that right now. You had a great living, but like I said, you had some flexibility that was not there. Now you're getting that flexibility. Most syndicators work as hard or harder than they did before, right? And so the second tier of financial freedom is really, and this is what EOS talks about, is really getting your company to run itself, which is really what we call it, moving into the owner's box. So creating a company, creating some scale, and then removing yourself from operations. right? Because at the end of the day, once it gets big enough, you can delegate large parts of the business. I mean, right now we have, for example, someone handling acquisitions, and that was a partner that's handling that before. We have a lot of automations around capital raising as well, so it's possible. And I think that is kind of the next tier, is building that company up where you're literally in the owner's box.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Because like, either you have a problem of not enough money, not enough time, right? And now it's like, how do I buy my time back? How do I leverage and outsource the people in my network, build a team, build a process and a system, like you said, Michael, to where you can get your time back, be in the owner's box, and really just kind of be a very efficient CEO.
That's
But
exactly
it takes
right.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's time, and money, and yeah, but the business has a potential for addressing both. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it happen for myself and for others as well. And there's very few other businesses in the world that have the ability to do that. And so I'm really excited about the syndication business. Now, if someone's listening to this right now going, "Hey, I want to be like Chad when I grow up," what's your advice to someone who's maybe involved in their own business, high income earner, but like you said, you feel like you're kind of on a hamster wheel a little bit? What is your advice for fast tracking to getting to where you are right now?
I would say if you want to fast track, I would say number one, find a program that you can get involved with a coach in your spare time. I think that's going to give you the confidence you need. It's going to give you the skills that you need to go out and find that first deal and your first syndication. I feel like you do your first deal, and then you're going to have a whole different outlook on life and real estate. And then you're going to be like, okay, this job, I have a 1 year timeline out left here. I'll be in real estate full time in a year, right? So I think, but I think the key, man, is just getting the coaching, so you have the confidence and go do your first deal, because real estate is an awesome thing.
That's awesome. Hey, Chad, it's been great jamming with you here. How can people connect with you?
Yep, LinkedIn, Chad Schieler. Also, my website, focuscapital.com.
That's awesome. All right, Chad, it's been great. Thanks for sharing your experience with us.
You as well. Thanks, man. See ya.